kick off the meeting while I get the agenda, and then we can go from there.
Okay. All right, let's get started then. I'm showing a couple minutes after 10. And what I'd like to do is just begin by announcing everyone's name. And if you would just say hello or make sure that I have the right folks so that we get attendance. I have in this room Luke Perez, Laurie Stolen, and Keith Meyer and myself. So those folks are covered. And I have Caroline Mitchell.
Yep, I'm here. Morning.
Howard. John Kafalis.
Here.
Ken Zorns.
It is I.
Kevin.
Here. Here.
Lucinda Smith.
Good morning, everyone.
And then I have a phone caller.
I'm in twice, so I can use my phone for audio. This is Ross.
Thank you. Rita Troxel.
I'm here.
Susie Gordon.
Good morning, everyone.
Tim Whitehouse. Tyler Brandenburg.
Hello.
And then Leah, our chairperson.
Hello.
Susan Gutowski.
Here. Listening.
And then as well, I have a list of listeners, and I'm not sure why Ross Knuff is on the listener list because he's definitely one of our policy committee members. So Ross, if you wouldn't mind saying hi.
I'm still on the phone, so I'm not using the computer for audio.
Okay. And I have Judy Schmidt. Laura Walker. Susie Gordon.
I'm here.
And one more phone.
Here comes Wade Troxel. Mayor Wade. There he is.
Hi, Laurie. Cody Bird's on the phone.
Oh, thanks, Cody, and welcome, Mayor. Okay, I think we have everybody. And Leah, are you ready for the agenda?
I am, although I think I'm turning it right back over to you all, but thanks for putting this together just to give us all an update on where things are at. I know the world is a little crazy these days, but it seems like you all are still moving forward on things in the waste shed policy space, and so just wanted to make sure we were all up to date and continuing to help be advocates for this as we can. So with that, it looks like the first presentation is from Laurie Stolen in regards to the behavioral health.
Don't hear you, Lou. Still not there. Still can't hear you.
Laurie's going to come on. I'm going to switch off here.
Thank you for your patience as we transfer our technology here in the room. Lou's going to mute his computer and I'm going to turn mine on, and then I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully we can get some confirmation here that everyone can see my presentation here. Put it into presentation mode. Can everybody see my presentation?
Looks good.
Great. Okay, wonderful. Well, first, let me start off by saying thank you for allowing me to join your policy council this morning, and I look forward to going through this presentation, and then hopefully at the end having some time for some Q&A. I'll be able to answer any questions that that you have. I'm thrilled with your passion and your interest around this issue. And I'm going through the presentation. Please feel free to let me know somehow that you have a question. I'm just looking at my presentation here, and in high five, I don't have the ability to see everybody's faces at the same time as my presentation. So maybe someone else in the room, if you see someone that's raising their hand or is asking a question, I won't be offended if you unmute yourself and you interrupt me to ask a question. I can't see any faces. Normally, I would rely on body language to get an indication from somebody, but I'll go ahead and jump in here, and you just let me know somehow if you want me to pause. So we are here to talk about the site selection for the behavioral health facility. And the site selection was developed really as a primary need based on the failure of the 2016 election. And we had immediately gone into doing some focus groups with members of our community from Estes Park, Berthoud, Fort Collins, and Loveland. And that focus group was conducted in February of 2017. What we really wanted to get out of those focus groups was what did you know about the ballot issue? What did you like about it? What didn't you like? And from their perception, why do they feel like it failed? And during the focus group aggregate data that came out of that, there were 3 primary issues. And one of those primary issues was that they didn't know where this facility was going to be located. The other issues were they didn't understand the issue quite enough to be able to make an informed decision, and that there was some misunderstanding about mental health, substance use, and behavioral health, and the terminology and the language, and really how that would necessarily impact all of Larimer County. So we feel like we went into 2017 prepared to be able to refine our messaging, and we certainly understood that defining a site was a primary importance to be able to get back on the ballot in 2018. So we immediately got in touch with our facilities real estate group manager, Jennifer Johnson, and we asked her to do some research broad and wide around Larimer County to look at some potential properties for consideration. And we gave her the parameters that we wanted to look at. We were really emphasizing a mid-county location. We had heard from a lot of citizens in our more rural areas that they did not want this to be a municipal-centric. They didn't want it to be just located in downtown Fort Collins. They didn't want it to be located in downtown Loveland. They really wanted it to feel like this was a county-wide effort. At a mid-county location. We also asked Jennifer to look for locations that ranged in size from 5 acres to 40 acres. We had hoped for a larger site because we wanted to do some future campus planning. And so we had hoped to find a site that we could have some vision and we could build on in the future. Lastly, we had allocated just a small amount of money. I think it was around $2 million in the initial budget for land. And so we had asked her to look for a range of costs for the acreage that we had asked her to map out for us. So ultimately, at the time that she looked, she spent about a month looking for properties, and there were properties that were turning over within that month period of time. And so we were realizing that property was becoming more and more challenging to find and to remain available for a period of time for us to make some decisions around. But ultimately, she came up with 8 different properties. And this next slide kind of shows some areas of potential sites that we looked at in Timnath, in Loveland, in Fort Collins. And this is kind of compares to the population hotspots, the population centers, and some densities of populations within the county. And so when we look at where our population densities are, we really were trying to emphasize sort of in this middle zone between Fort Collins and Loveland. And ultimately, this next site shows sort of a larger map of the population numbers, and then the scale of population with relative location to this site. To the landfill, which was one of the 8 sites that were in her Jennifer Johnson's proposed properties. The other 7 sites that we looked at were either immediately unavailable, meaning they got sold, or they were not mid-county. They were more centric to the north, to the south, to the east, or the west, or they did not have enough property, enough size to the property to give us the growth that we needed. So ultimately, out of those 8 locations, the one that met all of the criteria to move forward as a selection, a site for selection, was at the landfill. It was available, the cost was right, the size was right, and the location was right. And so that provided us with an opportunity to go to the commissioners and ask them if they would be willing to allow the Behavioral Health Initiative to earmark that land to do some further studies on. And so in August of 2017, we brought in HDR, an engineering firm who still to this day is working on the transfer station work and some engineering work with the waste shed project. We piggybacked on their contract and we had them come in and do a land use and site design process. And we invited 21 members from our community, stakeholders, leaders, and partners to come into that 3-day charrette and go through a process of mission, visioning, values, and a pros and cons list of this site as a potential to select for the behavioral health project. We looked at short and long-term needs, travel distances, again, those population densities, and we also considered the landfill site plan. We wanted to make sure that there were no unmitigatable circumstances to partnering and co-locating these 2 projects on this large space, which I think is around 360 acres overall, about 300 acres on this specific site. And so HDR recommended the current site ultimately to appropriate screening and buffers as the site for this behavioral health process. So after we went through that 3-day charrette, we went back to the commissioners in January of 18 and asked them if we could proceed with that as the site, if they felt that was agreeable terms for the site for this behavioral health issue. And at the time, Commissioner Steve Johnson said that there were no higher priorities in the county to use this portion of the land than for this behavioral health initiative. And so this location became the featured site selection for our 2018 sales tax campaign. Some of the pros and cons that came out of that HDR 3-day charrette are listed here. We looked at many pros and many cons. I think ultimately, to be very honest and very real, we came out of that recognizing that there's probably no such thing as a perfect location, truly. Perfect, it's sort of like beauty's in the eye of the beholder. There will be things that will be appealing to some and not to others, regardless of where it was. But ultimately, you can see the list of pros outweighed the list of cons, and we felt like the issues in our con list were mitigatable. We can all that have been around here for many years can realize that Harmony Road used to be on the very fringes of town. And so our internal little joke became for quite a while that this location is equally inconvenient for everyone. We recommend transportation, long-term transportation needs to the location. But when we're talking about a crisis facility, we quickly realize that we know very well how people get to crisis services. And they get there through law enforcement, co-responders, EMS, and family members. People rarely take public transportation when they're in crisis. It's possible that an Uber could be used or a taxi, I suppose, but rarely have we seen from any of our research that public transportation is a means for getting people to crisis services. And so our long-term goal of the site is to build it out into a campus. And we're in conversations with strategic plan partners within Larimer County to look at potential transportation partners. Actually, public transportation is the last on that list. We believe that dedicated and intentional transportation are the best solutions to get people to and from this site for the short term and even for the midterm. projects that we have planned. We looked at the distances for first responders, and we recognized that the average length of time to get to this site from the variety of different hospitals around Larimer County is around 7 minutes, with the longest distance being 14 minutes from MCR. So we felt like after we communicated with them that that was a reasonable amount of time for them to be able to transport people from emergency department, emergency rooms, from hospitals to and from if needed. And again, I don't need to go through this whole list of the pros and cons, but ultimately we decided that it was a suitable site for us to pursue moving forward. And so we used that in our marketing, messaging, and in our master plan for behavioral health services that we took to the ballot in 2018. And we all know that not only won, but it won significantly. It was 61% to 39%. And we felt at the time that we had strong support as evidenced by proclamations and declarations from the city of Fort Collins, the council, as well as Loveland at Estes Park. We had gotten a lot of support from mayors around Larimer County in this initiative, and it was successful at the ballot. And so we're thrilled to be able to move forward and start making this authorization in early 2019. So now I'm going to jump forward a little bit into 2019, what we've done on this since that period of time. I'd be happy to take a pause right here if anybody has questions before I move on to the actual site use and what we've done so far. Is there anybody that would like to pause right now or have comments, concerns?
Laurie, this is Wade, and I wanted to start off. I'm fully supportive of the behavioral health as I was during the campaign and all along. And would you talk about in the criteria and looking at partnerships? And I'm thinking of Summit Stone and some others, and co-location options. Were they evaluated in terms of public-private partnerships and how that might be incorporated?
Sure. Thank you very much for the question, Mayor. Absolutely. So we consider Summit Stone and UC Health our two primary partners in this project. And since the very beginning, we have had Summit Stone and UC Health around the table. Decisions have not been made in a vacuum for sure. We have had stakeholders and partnership meetings since 2015, whenever this became a strategic plan initiative on the county's 5-year strategic plan, before this was even put on the 2016 ballot. Summit Stone and UC Health were both partners at the table whenever we did the HDR 3-day charrette. And at that time is when we came to a verbal agreement with Summit Stone that if they were going to continue pursuing partnership with the county for the contract to provide services at this facility, they would likely move their current crisis stabilization unit that's on Riverside out to the site, and that we would realize some pretty significant economies and efficiencies by putting those services at a co-located site with other services. They have some limitations with where they're at right now with licensing, for one, that they are not able to take people that have substances or alcohol on board at the crisis stabilization unit. And again, that's due to licensing, not a fault of their own, but it does limit the level of services that they can provide to people. Look at numbers in our community, we realize that a large majority of folks that are struggling that need crisis services oftentimes have comorbidities, and they have substance as well as mental health issues going on at the same time. They exacerbate each other, and oftentimes you need to be able to treat both at the same time. And so Summit Stone at that time felt very strongly about the synergy that could be created if they were to move crisis services to a location that also had the substance use licensing. So at the time, before we had actually gone into contract with Summit Stone, they felt very appealed about this location, as it would serve all of Larimer County. It was a location that they could easily be accessed from Loveland as well as Fort Collins and from the farther north, southeast, and west municipalities within the county. That is one piece of it. And as I move on with our presentation here, I'm hoping that I'm able to show you with our large master plan or the footprint that we have of this site that that page. Our architects have already started to define future partnerships on our site, that it'll help further answer that question for you. Any other questions or comments before I move into site planning that's been done?
Laurie, this
Yeah, go ahead, John.
yeah, I just, so when UC Health and Summit Stone participated in the charrettes with the consulting firm around locations, did they express any level of concern regarding the location that's currently before us?
So the questions and the concerns that were brought up about this site were, one, was there any contamination of the soil that would prohibit us providing behavioral health services there? And that was determined, the answer to that was no. There was no contamination that would preclude us from co-locating behavioral health services on this site. Another question was, honestly, as we all know, is what will you do about the prairie dogs? And so there's a mitigation plan that's in place with our partners at the transfer station and with Waste Shed to manage that. And then, of course, the remote location of this site was brought up as an issue. And again, that goes back to recognize that not too long ago, Harmony was a remote location, and we know that Larimer County is continuing to grow, and that Taft Hill is becoming more and more a main arterial roadway in Larimer County, and that with the end for intentional transportation, that mitigated any concerns that at the time about it being a remote location. There were no other concerns that were brought up with this site.
So, Laurie, folks didn't bring up the perception or a concern that we've heard from the mayor and other folks maybe, that co-locating the behavioral health facility in close proximity to the updated landfill, the transfer station and the composting station to the north, that did not come up as an issue or a concern?
It did not, Commissioner, no. In fact, what we heard in opposition of that is that it was co-located with natural spaces. It was neighbored to the south with Coyote Ridge, and it's neighbored to the east with Kathy Fromm Prairie, and that there's beautiful views to the west and beautiful views to the northwest, and that we could have an opportunity to put in some beautiful nature trails and walking trails, and that it was a prime location because of the seclusion, the quietness, the connection to nature, and it gave people a sense of healing and a sense of peace and serenity at this site.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? All right, hearing none, please again, if I missed somebody or if you have a question, please feel free to interrupt. I'm going to move on to
Laurie, this
yes.
Wade again. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Would you talk? I know that there was a lot of discussion about the distributed nature, and each community. So it wasn't. It wasn't a centralized location. So, and so. You explained more or less how it, from the 7 or so different locations and how the site was selected, but is there still a distributed nature to the services? And the other point I want to make is during this time, it was really about the need for having behavioral health, I think, and not so much about site selection, although, I remember it more in the distributed nature discussion.
Sure. Thanks again for clarifying that and asking the question for further clarification. So our behavioral health initiative is larger than just the crisis services facility. We have 3 primary funding pathways. And the first funding pathway is called our Impact Fund. And we are actually in open grant process right now. We opened it June 1st and grants are available. Grant applications are being taken July 31st. This year we have $2.5 million available to distribute around Larimer County. And one of our main priorities in that distribution of grant funding is geographic distribution. We want to have a diverse portfolio of grants that really show that we're focusing on the needs in our 8 municipalities of Larimer County. And so this facility, as it being a hub for the crisis services, the long-term intentions of this project are really to do community-based programming and to expand access and awareness for appropriate and affordable behavioral health care around Larimer County. So this site is just one of the components of the overall behavioral health initiative, and we believe that the grant funding has as much, if not more, opportunity for impact across Larimer County as we infuse dollars into services that people can more easily access within their own communities. But yet we still felt the need and identified the critical gaps in behavioral health care, such as not having our own dedicated detox here in Larimer County, as well as not having intensive residential treatment except in our community corrections department with Larimer County, which unfortunately means that we would oftentimes have to criminalize people in order to get the treatment that they need. And so the services levels that we're providing in the facility are really to fill the most critical gaps. And then the impact fund or the grant funding is to really expand and enhance community-based behavioral health services. So hopefully we're attempting to solve the issues on multiple fronts. Any other comments, questions at this time?
Well, it's important to note, Laurie, that we approved $115,000 to be distributed as a COVID-19 response fund, crisis response fund, and those dollars went to, I think, 9 organizations. So that's an example where we're trying to be as responsive as we can be given the current situation. Thanks.
You're absolutely right. Thank you for mentioning that. That did get carved off of our $2.5 million that we are going to distribute this year. $115,000 was distributed in early May. And then we also have a $50,000 Gary A. Darling grant that we will award to a recipient that is doing good work at the intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health. And so we've got about $2.3 million in an open grant cycle that we hope to receive applications for through the summer and then award in early fall this year. Hearing no further comments at this time, I'm going to jump into the architecture and site planning. So Ditesco and Keith Myers as our project coordinator was hired on in May of 2019, over a year ago now, as the project manager for behavioral health, and then later for the transfer station. In October of 2019, Paige Sutherland Page was hired as the lead architect to continue site analysis, the master planning and final design efforts for the behavioral health facility. So far in the site planning, we have completed site analysis that has evaluated zoning, traffic, noise, topography, wind, the sun, the views, the weather, and the cost for some future campus options and programming that would be included in the future site inclusions. Some of the things that have gone into the planning so far since May of 2019 are regular communications, and as evidenced by, if you could see it for Lou Perez and Hedrich and Keith Myers and I are sitting around the room together here at the solid waste facility. We are in regular communications and have weekly meetings to make sure that we are good partners and being as economic and efficient as we can as we both are working through these projects with a similar timeline. Both working with HDR on the transfer station design. As I said, we would piggyback on that contract to the land planning for the behavioral health. As evidenced by Ditesco being the lead project management effort for both projects. And then shared responsibility for neighborhood outreach and infrastructure improvements. We are going to have a neighborhood meeting on Saturday. And so the 4 of us will be available to have a conversation with the HOA and the members of the Hidden Springs community out here to make sure that we keep good communications with them as our neighbors as well. At this date, behavioral health is 30% complete with design. We're finished programming. We just successfully completed schematic design and moved into design development, which we hope to bring on our construction manager at risk contract by the end of July. That RFP is out on the street right now, and we had a successful pre-bid, pre-proposal meeting yesterday, and we had 80 attendees to that virtual pre-proposal meeting. So there is certainly quite a bit of interest. And I believe some of the members of that pre-proposal meeting were not just from local companies or state companies, but possibly even from outside of the state that may have an interest in participating in this work. We recognize that this behavioral health initiative has national attention. This fall, I was invited back to New York City to present on the behavioral health initiative because it was seen as such a successful partnership between public and private and government entities to accomplish really unprecedented work in a community. And so we recognize that there is a lot of interest and that the nation's watching. And we are really excited to be doing such innovative and creative work on the behavioral health front. The transfer station is proceeding towards 90% complete design. There's around $300,000 that has been spent so far on site-specific design costs. Location and extent is well underway. Planning Commission meeting is scheduled next week, the 17th, for L&E review of both projects. I'm going to continue talking about site design and some of the components of the intentionality that has been put into this site and making sure that it will be a not just successful site for the contractors and for the county, but for those end users, those people that are going to come and get their care, that are coming here in crisis, that are coming here in need, and making sure that this is a place that is safe, that is welcome, that is peaceful and warm and healing for people that continue using it. I've said from the beginning that I would like this to be a facility that if I had a family member that needed these services, that I would be proud to bring my family member here. And so when we look at this site from a really high view, this is kind of a satellite view. If you're looking to the west, you've got unobstructed views into nature. And then to the east, you've got views into the community. And so that's just kind of one vision as we continue to move into more of the sketches and the design of this facility. We're hoping that the site is rotated on the site to really give the best of all of the sun and the weather, the views, the view shed that we want folks to have as they're in their rooms, as they're being treated in certain group rooms, that they have these views of trees and labyrinths of walking trails and places for them to heal. And so we were very intentional about how we set the facility itself on the property and making sure that the property itself was being maximized for the appealing views that it would provide to the users. I love this site. I love this this view, this picture that I put on here. And it shows, again, that intentionality of people coming in with a focus and a view on the mountains. It's a focused entry. And as you walk in the front of the building, it opens up into big windows looking west. A front door that's towards the southeast intersection. And it kind of gives this intention of expansion and journey through. People are coming to this facility on a journey, hopefully, of healing. And the view that they will get when they walk in, and I'll show you some more renderings as we move through this presentation. It's almost awe-inspiring as you look through the facility and into the nature that they'll get this view of to the west. The intention of this facility is really to paint the picture of a transition from sickness to wellness, towards calming and towards outdoor respite. And so we'll be very intentional at that western, at the green area of the building on the northwest side, is to make sure that that's a safe space that's got greenery, that's got family space, it's got group meeting space. And then lastly, we really looked at the intentionality of transition towards light, the front of the building being more opaque, and then towards the back of the building being more transparent, that it feels protected. And hopefully you can just see that there's some real intentionality of how people would approach this building, and as they come through, how treatment and care and concern continues to be delivered through the model of the building itself.
Laurie, can I ask a question? How does the intake to the facility, when you were describing the transportation, that most would be through our police officers by AMS, and you know, you made it more crisis, and so therefore it, you know, like emergency vehicle kind of imagery,
Sure.
and less about ongoing treatment, and that was to make the argument that less on public transit line and more
Right.
on single occupancy, whether it be EMS, police, or a family. So
You bet.
how does the intake happen? It sounds like it's more like an emergency room drive-through kind of a thing than it is a lobby.
You're absolutely right. And I'm just getting ready to get into that. This picture here, this view shows the blue dot, which is right here hovering under my mouse. That's the public main entrance. And then this yellow is the staff entrance. And then this red at the front of the building that's got this quickest access is for our EMS, our first responder, and ambulatory drop-off. And so we'll get into some close-up pictures here as I continue to move forward. There's much intentionality. We have had many meetings already, and we'll continue to have meetings with our law enforcement partners from Fort Collins PD. We've spoken with Chief Swoboda. We've spoken with quite a few different officers, Jared Kinsman, with Fort Collins, and also with Loveland. Our plans are to continue having the conversations with our first responder partners, co-responders, and law enforcement to make sure that this location and how this is designed and the flow of this part of the building is really usable for them. We recognize that if first responders, law enforcement don't find this to be user-friendly, they won't use it. They'll end up just doing what they're doing now. And our intention really is to reduce overutilization of our emergency rooms and overutilization of our jail and criminal justice services. And so as we get into some closer pictures here, you'll certainly see that this is a drive-through Sallyport. As you enter the doors with law enforcement, there's a whole section of our behavioral health triage hub that is dedicated to their services. They've got their own restrooms.
Would you a percent of folks that you think are going to come in through this process versus that might come on their own for some kind of treatment?
Great question.
100%.
So Laurie Kadrick asked the question as sort of a follow-up to this, is the percentage of people that will be coming through law enforcement through these sort of first responders versus on their own. And what we know about behavioral health crisis, whether it's substance or alcohol use or mental health, is oftentimes crisis is the time when someone is most willing to receive help. When someone is in crisis, they're usually rock bottom. They're usually at wit's end. They are usually at a time where they cannot manage it on their own anymore. And they would be willing to get the services as long as they knew that it was going to be safe, that their voice was going to be heard, and ultimately that they would have a say in their treatment, in their care. And so we recognize that crisis itself is a moment of challenge, a moment of difficulty. And so the majority of people that come to crisis services come there under someone else's volition. The majority of people, and I'm talking about 80 to 85% of the people that will be coming to crisis services will be coming under the support and transportation of our EMS, co-responder, law enforcement partners. Oftentimes you will see someone that has suicidal ideation that may come in on their own volition. They may be worried or concerned about their own mental health, and they may be scaring themselves, and oftentimes they would be willing to walk in or to drive themselves. But otherwise, normally if someone is having a psychotic episode, if they're having hallucinations, delusions, or certainly if there's substance use or alcohol on board to the level of intoxication. Folks do not show up at these kind of places on their own volition. They are brought here. So hopefully that answers your question, Laurie. So, Mayor, if you would allow me just to kind of continue on with a little bit of this overall site design, I promise you we will continue to drill down into some of these more specific pieces of the facility itself, and you will see closer up sort of this behavioral health triage hub and how the law enforcement and first responders will access this facility, and how the intentionality to care for them and their needs when they're on site continues to unfold. So this is a pretty good key over here on the left side. Hopefully you all can see that. This project itself that we're working on right now is primarily just number one. It's the behavioral health facility itself. It's around a 56,000 square foot facility. It's going to have 64 beds in there, 6 different levels of service. There will be a social detox, medical detox. There'll be the behavioral health triage hub. There will be intensive residential treatment, the crisis stabilization unit. There will be a whole unit for care coordination, discharge planning. There's going to have assessment. We'll have medication assisted treatment in there. There will be pharmacy services. Our pharmacy services, we've actually decided, are going to be a retail pharmacy as well as an on-site pharmacy for the needs of the docs and prescribers on site. We hope that a retail pharmacy would be a community accessed type of service. And as we continue to grow out this master planned campus, we are intentional about making sure that those retail pharmacy services would be available for anyone to come in, access from the front lobby, and feel safe getting their pharmacy services taken care of there. So this is the focus of our project right now, is here. You can see the walking trails that our landscape architects have already started to insert. And as we look at some different aspects of our overall site design, we should see kind of some main staff parking over here to the east and public parking up here in the front. This building number 4 is a future adolescent center, and number 5, we know that youth services is a high need in our community, and we want to prioritize future expansion of, services for youth in our community. Number 2 up here is outlined as future permanent supportive housing. We certainly know that we have opportunities for growth of supportive housing. We know our partners in the Housing Catalyst have done a tremendous job at Red Tail Ponds, and as they bring Mason Place on board, we continue to have conversations about what the future might look like in partnership, where we could possibly provide some co-located services for permanent supportive housing on this site as well. Again, I want to emphasize that these partnerships aren't developed out yet. They're just conceptual ideas for what might be successful partnerships on this overall 40-acre plot of land out at Taft Hill and Trilby. Number 3 we have here is outlined as future supportive retail. And by retail, we don't mean Chico's and Macy's. We mean more like vision, dental, primary health care, other health care or behavioral health services, maybe some intensive outpatient services that folks that were in need of different behavioral health care services would come to this campus for. Our ultimate goal is this is a wellness campus, that people would feel safe coming here and doing conferences. We out here on M, we've got Future Equestrian Center. We would love to partner with a Hearts and Horses kind of program to bring equestrian therapy to the site. And so we've earmarked off some land for potential to do some equine assisted therapy out here. I don't know if you all know, but I was Hearts and Horses' first certified instructor back in 1999. And my heart will always be with Hearts and Horses, and we know the successes of equine assisted therapy. So this kind of just gives you an overall quick view of what the master site plan looks like for this campus idea that we have for in the future. I'm going to jump onto the next screen and pause here for just 1 second to see if there are any questions or comments that anybody has so far. Wonderful. So I want to follow up on one question, and I want to make sure that you understand how we determined that there were no issues with groundwater contamination. We had engineers come in. We had, I'm looking for the right language from around the room of who were the geotechnical engineers. Thank you. You know, I'm a little bit outside of my wheelhouse with the language. Geotechnical engineers that came in and determined that the location of this behavioral health facility itself, there were no groundwater contamination issues that would impact us locating this facility here. I would certainly pass it on to Laurie Kadrich or Lou Perez or even to Keith Myers to talk about any other groundwater issues that are being addressed on the site itself. But as related to what I can talk about in this behavioral health facility, those geotechnical engineers verified that there were no unmitigatable circumstances with the groundwater for the successful building of a behavioral health site there. Another question that might come up.
Excuse me, Laurie, this Wade again. Well, geotechnic, it's also, this is bentonite soils. I imagine if it's undisturbed, it probably is expansive soils, so requiring that concern as well.
You're absolutely right, Mayor, and you are getting into the conversation level that Keith and Lou certainly need to take over when we talk about putting our facility on caissons and making sure that we've got stability and the full awareness of the expansive soil that we are building on and making sure that we are including all of the design needs to accommodate that expansive soil. And if there's further discussion that's needed on that, I would certainly hand that over to Lou or Keith to take on, because that is definitely outside of my area of expertise.
I would appreciate hearing more. Susan Gutowski here. I'd appreciate hearing just a little bit more on that, if you don't mind.
I don't at all. Would you like me to pause the rest of my presentation on the site itself and allow Keith or Lou to jump in, or do you want me to hold that until I'm finished and then pass it off to them? I'll do it either way.
I'd like you to carry on with your presentation, and then we can address this issue and other questions at the end.
Right.
Okay, so I think that makes the most sense. I'm almost finished, and then when I'm done, I am going to hand it over to Lou and to Keith to answer any questions, and for them to do their presentation on the progress on composting in the facility, and I think it would be a good segue into that conversation as well. So I'll continue to move on here quickly to continue showing a little bit of the planning and the design that has gone into the intentionality of our behavioral health facility here, and hopefully you can leave this presentation with the idea of what a warm and safe and welcoming place that we're really designing. I want to say one more thing about people in crisis. If anybody has ever experienced a crisis itself, you may realize it, but oftentimes our site, our literal physical site, narrows down to just what's right in front of us when we are in crisis. And so our goal is really to make the approach to this facility as accessible, as safe, as non-threatening as can be, and then the immediate grounds around this facility to really be calming, to be peaceful, to be serene, and to encourage people to accept the help and the healing and the treatment services that will be available for them, not just through the staff that are here, but through the actual physical building itself. So these are a few renderings from the outside, sort of looking at that main entrance, as you can start to get a view going through the front lobby. Very transparent. A lot of clear story in the back of the building that goes through to get a lot of natural sunlight in from the west and the northwest of the building. This goes back up to a satellite view again, but just to give a perspective of the space that we have, the large acreage that we have, and how we feel like both of these projects fit well with ample space for expansion, for future growth of both of our projects on this property. There's a 1,500 foot, which is almost, is that 5 football fields? Is it 300 acres on a feet on a football field? I'm again out of my wheelhouse, but 1,500 feet between the building to building. And the transfer station is actually a little bit elevated. It's at a higher elevation than the behavioral health facility itself. And so with well-planned berming and screening around our behavioral health site, we believe that the transfer station is just going to be a distant building off in the northwest corner that won't be a focal point, with real intentionality of bringing people's focus to the natural area right around this immediate 40 acres that the behavioral health facility will be on. So hopefully this kind of gives a perspective from that satellite view of the expanse of land that we're working with here on both projects. We're going to jump in quickly for just a moment here to show the interior of the building. We've got some initial renderings as we entered into schematic design that shows some of the decisions that have been made on the design of this facility and as the programming is happening in the facility to make sure that it is really user-friendly. This first view up here in the top left is the reception desk at the main entry of the building. And then off immediately to the left is our pharmacy and then behavioral health triage hub. So folks coming into the lobby certainly have an opportunity to get immediately taken into treatment and services. And then there's also the bottom left here is the waiting area out in that main waiting area for folks that are using the retail pharmacy or that come to visitation. They've come to pick up folks that are being discharged, or family that is waiting for someone that's getting treatment here in the facility itself. Over here on the top right, again, I think this view shows the intention of having open and transparent views out to the west to our foothills. This is a conference room that we plan on putting on level 2. And it shows that, again, there's layers of transparency. We plan on this being a community shareable space, that people from our community would be able to reserve this conference room space to use for community purposes. This bottom right picture here is a unique component of our building, and it is considered a, I was hoping the words that were in there, it's a light well. It's an interior courtyard in part of the building where not as much natural light was able to come in from the window views. The architects have intentionally built this enclosed light well space with the skylight in it that we would be able to have staff and or clients be able to get some fresh air, to be able to get out in the sunlight and to bring natural light into the depths of that behavioral health hub. All the research and studies that we're looking at and understanding is that natural light is just critical for health and healing. So we want to make sure that we put that, infuse natural light into the facility as much as possible. Just a couple more pictures of the interior to kind of take you through the facility as we have it so far through schematic design. This is a view from the patient's multi-purpose area, part of the medical withdrawal unit. It shows good physical connection between the nursing unit and the patients. Over here on the top right is a view from the main nurses station. This is within the crisis stabilization unit, looking into the patient's multi-purpose space and the windows on each end. Bottom left over here is where we've got a view of this social detox, the social withdrawal unit. We really want this to be a hands-on unit. We plan on having some patient rooms around the outside as well as recliners for those folks that most likely their stay is going to be 8 hours or less. We talk about those folks that just need to metabolize to freedom, that have partied a little too much at a CSU game, need a safe place to withdraw, possibly get engaged with some pro-social relationships or to some treatment options if needed here in this facility. And then really using a lot of light and glass in these spaces to provide levels of transparency as well. This last picture here is of a 2-patient bedroom. And as you can see, the planned views of the near and the far outside the window, promoting connection to nature and allowing that daylight again. Our intention with the patient rooms is that they are durable and they're safe in design for patients for the long term. So that kind of is my quick tour of the facility itself. I would be happy to answer any other questions that you have. I want to kind of go back to this view for a moment because as I was right here, I think a couple of questions came up. I wasn't able to further converse about where I'm circling my cursor right now. Going back to the mayor's question of law enforcement first responder access to the facility. As you enter into the parking lot, the first place that law enforcement ambulance would come is through this entrance here. And there's enough space under here for multiple vehicles. And this is a drive-through. We've heard that oftentimes law enforcement may need to be able to clean out their cars, so there'll be a cleaning station available for them. Inside the access to the building here, they will have their own conference space, their own lounge area, vending machine, coffee machine, a place to do the reporting. They will have their own restroom. And so we've really taken a lot of input from our law enforcement partners to ensure that this will be a very usable, convenient, and accessible space for them to be able to do drop-offs and as quickly as possible get back out to doing their job on the streets. And we plan on continuing to have those conversations to make sure as we move through design that we are meeting those needs as much as possible and hearing their input. So with that, I'm finished my presentation on the behavioral health facility, where we are to today and how we came to the decisions that we came to. Hopefully I've answered much of your questions, but I would be more than happy to entertain any further questions that you have at this time. I'm going to get out of here so I can maybe start to see some faces of people as you're talking.
Laura, I have a couple of questions. Oh,
Before
Okay.
we start with the question, could I just remind everybody to mute unless you're speaking because the echo is getting really bad again? Thank you.
Laurie, my two questions are this. Regarding the decisions around how this building on the inside will be decorated and perhaps on the outside, how will those decisions be made? Because I would want to make sure that whatever paintings or pictures or murals are put up, that they are recognizing that they are inclusive as possible and that they're recognizing cultural sensitivity, cultural attunement. So that's one question. How are we going to decide what goes up on the walls so it's as welcoming a place as possible for all different groups, community sectors? That's question number one.
Okay, we'll answer these as we go through. So you're asking a pretty programmatic down the road kind of question. What I can tell you is that the intentionality of this facility to be inclusive will continue through the design and the programming and the contracting of this initiative. It's not just something that was part of one part of the project, but our inclusivity of the project goes all the way through the project. So as we're bringing on the FF&E, the furniture, fixtures, and equipment, we will certainly be looking at inclusive design. We'll be looking at making sure that things are anti-ligature. Those kind of things don't really, impact one population or another, but that would be a safety issue for across all. When we're looking at specific inclusivity for artwork pieces that may make different cultural populations feel welcome in this site, that would be something that we would obviously have agreement on. I can't tell you what the committee would look like. It's possible that we could use an already established committee to make those decisions, or maybe we create a new committee to make sure that those decisions are made and that there's inclusive considerations when those design decisions are made. Again, that's down the road now.
Yeah, I just want to make sure it's not too far down the road. And also I would recommend that one group that you could consult with is La Cocina. And my second question, and thank you, Laurie, my second question is the scenarios that you described earlier about what the behavioral health practitioners tell us about a crisis center and how folks get there, and generally they don't get there on their own. Are those the same kinds of patterns that we see with the Summit Stone Crisis Service Center over on Riverside, or for example, the Detox Center over in Greeley?
Probably more so with the Detox Center in Greeley, because they deal with people that have substance use and alcohol on board as well as their mental health crises. The crisis stabilization unit on Riverside is only licensed for mental health. It is not licensed for substance use or alcohol disorders or people that have substances on board. So we know that people that have suicidal ideation, that have exacerbated anxiety, stress, or they're having psychotic episodes go to crisis stabilization. But unfortunately, Larimer County doesn't have access to those detox services. And so oftentimes the emergency room physicians are seeing those folks coming into the ER, or if there's real issues with behavior, they're seeing them at the jail. So the goal of this facility would be to combine those two things, having the licensure to be able to see both populations at this site. Hopefully that answers your questions. Were there any more, Commissioner?
I'm fine for now, Laurie. Thank you.
Okay, next.
Laurie, it's Ken. I stepped out for a moment. Maybe I missed this. Was there any mention of food service component in the building?
Thank you. I didn't mention it. There absolutely are plans to have full food services in the facility. We will contract out those services to a provider similar to how the jail contracts out their food services or how alternative sentencing, similar to how the hospital provides food services to their patients, right? We plan on having food services available, and then those foods will be transported to the patients on the units 3 meals a day. And that will be part of that contracting that we get into as the building comes online. But great question, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that there was some other questions, technical questions, Laurie, that you couldn't answer, and maybe we can have Lou and or I don't know, the appropriate person to answer those questions and then keep moving along.
Okay, absolutely. If there's no further questions for behavioral health, I'll pass it over to Keith and Lou, and I'll mute my stuff so we don't get echoing in the room.
I do have one, Susan, again. I was wondering, Laurie, do you have a link to your slides so that we could review them again sometime?
Yes, so this PowerPoint was posted online by Rita, and she can certainly guide people to the link to this presentation itself. And then I'll also tell you that our schematic design programming, I don't know what else you'd call it, the whole presentation is available on our website on the larimer.org/behavioral health under facility. So all of the up-to-date renderings, and I'll just add one other thing that our architects and Keith have worked on for us, which is a really cool new digital way for anybody in the community that has a QR code reader on your phone can go to the renderings, hold your phone up to the QR code, and then you literally can take a 3-dimensional tour through that portion of the facility yourself on your own time. And so we'll make sure that that's available on our website as well.
Thank you.
Sure. Anything else on the behavioral health front? I'm going to look in the group chat here and make sure. Oh, yes, and since this meeting is being recorded, thank you, Commissioner Johnson. We can archive this on our county meeting page. Hopefully, Rita, you could kind of maybe coordinate that. All right, I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and pass it over to Lou and Keith. Thank you all for your attention, and please feel free to reach out anytime you have other questions. I would be more than happy to answer your questions.
Hey, and Laurie, if you want to hang out for just a minute after the technical questions are answered, because we might have just a larger conversation with the commission, and so just to make sure.
I'm not going anywhere.
Okay.
I'll be here.
So hi everyone, this is Keith Meyer. I can answer the questions around the more technical aspects of the facility. I think the first one was regarding the groundwater contamination, and the facility itself is clean. The site itself, there's no groundwater contamination anywhere in the vicinity. We will install a force main and lift station for sewer service that will cross some groundwater contamination at a landfill that we'll have to remediate via some construction techniques with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. The second question, I think, was around the soil stability and the soil expansive nature of the soil. The site does have expansive soils, so the foundation of the building will be very structural in nature. It's a caissons with a full crawl space facility to avoid the impacts of moving soils on the facility. So I think that answers that question. Are there others I can entertain?
Mayor Troxel, does that answer your question? Are you?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Okay. All right, then. Well, I mean, I certainly want to actually, Mayor Troxel, put you on the spot a little bit and ask, because I really appreciate this presentation, and I think it clearly, I mean, we all know as communities that supported the mental health initiative are in support of this and moving forward. And I know that there were some concerns from Fort Collins and brought those up. And I think that for me personally, this has really addressed all of those. And I think that there's been a tremendous amount of thought and work that's obviously been put into this to get us to where we're at. And I'm fully comfortable. And I just wanted to check in Wade and Ross and folks in Fort Collins if this feels like we're in a good place or we need to keep having further conversations.
I have another question related to some of the aspects of the landfill future use. Basically there aren't trees out there, and so with wind and high-speed winds and with the composting and so forth, I wonder just generally if we had a public input session now that really showed the co-location of the new facilities for both the behavioral, the health, and the of the waste shed purposes, and how that would be, just to get public input on that. From my perspective, as I saw, and I've been a supporter of both the whole time, but the co-location and the truck traffic and it is a gorgeous site, but it'll be in it'll have industrial purposes.
Wade, we've lost you.
Sorry. I'm sorry. Anyway, I just don't know if it's a clear picture that the community would have, and that's where I'm just maybe suggesting a public open house and just to see the site plan and comment and that sort of thing.
And from my perspective, I would echo that we just need to be very transparent, that people know what's going to happen. I'd also like to know, what operational parameters are going to be required of the transfer facility. Will it be daylight hours only, or what are the noise and maybe dust mitigation considerations that need to be done operationally for it?
Is that Laurie or Lou? Is that something you all?
So just I think.
Lou and I, so sorry about that delay. There's no problem to do a public open house and share information on the entire site. I think that'd be really good. It's similar to the approach we're taking with the adjacent residents in the area. I would just say that there are plans for dust mitigation, and the transfer station is enclosed, and so the kind of activities that you might see at the site today with the landfill operations will not be what's occurring in the future, so it'll be a very different view. And if you haven't been out here lately, you may want to come by, because you'll start to see what the landfill closure is going to look like overall, because our grass is starting to grow now in the areas that have had cover. So it'll be a very different looking location than what it has been in the past.
Good. Is there?
Leah.
Yeah, I just realized. Okay, is there any other comments or questions for Laurie in regards to this agenda item? If not, we can move on to Lou. I think certainly a public meeting is great. I mean, this is really an incredible thing for our county, and so I think the more we can share it with that, and the cohesive message of how this is all working together will make a lot of sense. So thank you very much, Laurie, for being here.
Laurie and I will continue to work together and make sure that we are partners on this in building out an open house to people to come out and be able to see what's going on with both of the projects. So thank you.
Terrific, thank you. All right then, moving on to the next agenda item, which is the progress on the composting facility from Lou. Thanks, Lou.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for letting me present. And that was a fabulous presentation, Laurie. Thank you so much for providing that information. I'm going to pause for a minute here and share my screen, and then I'll check to make sure that everyone has access to my screen. So give me 1 second. Can everyone see the screen, this presentation? Cool, thank you. Let me go into presentation mode, a couple of slideshows here, and we'll start talking about compost. We recently completed our 60% drawing and completion of the project for our compost site. Now, this is for our yard waste compost operation, which is our phase 1 approach. We're looking at the compost in 2 phases. Phase 1 is yard waste, and phase 2, which we're planning to do a little further down the road, will be our food waste integration into this project. At the 60%, we have a good design, and I have some drawings and layouts here that I'm going to show in this presentation. I'm going to have some interesting information on the layout, the location, where it's at, what are some of the main features associated with the site, and I'll certainly open it up to questions and comments, and we could talk a little bit more further about it. We will be at 90% around the end of July, and towards the end of this presentation, I will give you some layouts as far as our timelines, where we are with our timelines, kind of some information relative to the Gantt chart that we have together, our master Gantt chart with our project scheduling. I'll put that for you. But we'll be at 90% right about the end of July. We are going to be submitting for our Class 1 compost operation permit. We are also in the midst of our air permit as well, because of the sharing of the air permit with the current landfill site, the APINs associated with the equipment and the emissions. Everything has to be in accordance with our standard Title V air permit. So that development is taking place. We've also had conversations with CHPE. Heather Barber is our regulator, and we actually had a meeting with her back in November. We had another meeting with her just recently at the 60% level. She went over our design. We've given her all the drawings. We've given her, as well as our basis of design report, a about a 60-page basis of design report relative to the operational aspects of the facility. We've given her that information, and she's doing a review and will be coming back to us with any comments associated with the site and the site location and the plans that we have to move forward. The project development has been one that has manifested some capital and operational savings since the initial development of the master plan. What's ideal is we've been actually able to reduce the initial capital costs associated with this project. The original projections from HDR back from the SWIMP, the Solid Waste Master Plan, was around $10 million. And right now our projections just for the phase 1 compost operation for the yard waste, we're looking at $5.8 million. And that's a pretty significant savings. One of the main reasons of that savings is because we have a water source tap right at that site location. Now, this compost operation utilizes a lot of water, some 1.6 million gallons per year of water is going to be utilized by this site. That's pretty significant because to keep the compost at what we call the healthy state, healthy level, so it doesn't go anaerobic, you have to keep a moisture level between 40 and 60%. Because of the dry climate and the nature of just where we are, the compost operation is going to use a lot of water. So we're blessed with the fact that we have a water source, and that was one of the prime objectives of why we chose one of several, but that was one of the prime objectives of why we chose that particular location. That location also sits on a lot of clay soil. Oh, shoot, my battery's running low. I have to get my cord. Oh, boy. So sorry, folks. I was in the conference room and my battery just flicked and said, oh, you're running low. So Laurie's coming to the rescue with a cord. So you're going to see her fidgeting behind me. The other thing that's interesting about this site is the fact that, hold on one second. On the back here. Thank you so much. Sorry for that little technical difficulty. I failed to plug in my laptop and it just ran out of juice just a few minutes ago, but we're good. The other thing about the site that's very interesting is the fact that it sits on a lot of clay soil. And we were using that clay soil on that site when we were capping one of the sections of our landfill. Just last year, we had a capping of a section of our landfill. And when you cap a landfill, you use a lot of clay. And we use the clay from this particular area to cap one of our landfill sections and areas, one of the phases. In doing that, as we capped it and we removed the clay, we also graded the site. Now that's important because the site, it's a big acre site, it's a big 23-acre site, and we graded it in such a way that we know that we had the right gradient slopes in the association of the future development where we want to see the contact water as well as the groundwater. So we actually did that while we were in conjunction of pulling clay out of the area for our capping process. That was just foresight that we actually did, the solid waste department did in retrospect, and knowing that one day we're going to potentially use this site. So we went ahead and graded it as we were going through it, which saved hundreds and thousands of dollars in site development work. With all that aspect, the other key thing about the site is the fact that it has a lot of clay right in that particular area, some 10 to 18 feet of clay. Now, why is that important? Because clay is a natural protective layer for groundwater. It doesn't allow the water to penetrate through. It's kind of like a natural buffer. And that is another reason why we chose that site, because of the protective layers that's already there. The other aspect about that site that I didn't mention earlier, there is no waste buried underneath there. This is an area where there is no waste buried underneath that area. The area has been, we've been using as what they call a borrow area for clay. So there are areas and sections around, and I'll show you in the map, of where some of the waste is buried, but particularly underneath there is absolutely no solid waste buried, because we also did bore samples. As far as some of our geotechnical investigations, we went in there and board sampled the area prior to. The other thing we're doing at that site that's kind of key and important, even though we don't have to do it right now, we are putting in monitoring wells. And why is that important? Because that is something that we want to put in place right now relative to the phase 2. Down the road, if we go into our food waste, we're going to need a different permit. We're going to need actually an EDOP, Engineering Design and Operation Plan, and a certificate of designation, a CD. So we need a totally different licensing process associated with the phase 2, similar to our landfill, our new landfill application. And in there, you're going to have to do some ground watering. But we went ahead, part of our infrastructure right now today, we made the executive decision to start putting in ground monitoring wells. It also allows us to monitor the site and to make sure that we are not adding any contamination to the groundwater during our operations. And we will be continuing to monitor the groundwater in association for that site, specifically in conjunction to the groundwater monitoring that we're doing with the landfill application. Last thing I want to mention on this site, that's our key features. We also received a grant from Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. CDHPE has a grant that's called the RREO grant, and we received $680,000 for equipment. And that site is going to take, we're going to need about 3 major pieces of equipment. We're going to need a front loader, we're going to need a windrow turner, and we're going to need a grinder. We're going to need a very big grinder. This is a very big piece of equipment, very expensive. And we were very fortunate enough to get a grant associated with that for our landfill diversion as part of our master plan. Now, the hitch on this, if we don't complete the project, we will have to give back the grant. The cycle for the grant is June of 2020 to June of 2021. Within that time frame, we have to complete the project and we have to order the equipment. Those are some of the constituents associated with the grant. I'm going to pause for a second and see if anyone has any questions.
I have some questions.
Yes, please.
In regards to that grant, is that a federal grant?
No, it's from the state, Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, CHPE. It's called the RREO grant. It is for environmental services and applications.
And you think that we can get all of the things you need accomplished in that time frame to make sure
we can. It's right now we're on project schedule. We've had some hiccups. We're probably 2 months behind our original schedule. Some of that is due to the LNE process. We've had some hangups with our LNE, but we're trying to resolve those right now. But if we move forward accordingly, and I'll show you the schedule towards the end of the presentation, we will make our commitment of having this operation up and running by June of 2021. That is our goal.
Thank you.
Hey, Lou, I have a question.
Yes, please.
So this is Wade. I didn't realize the amount of water usage. That's a lot. And I appreciate your explanation with regards to the clay and how that becomes a barrier, if you will, to groundwater. But it does raise the question of surface water and detention facilities and things like that and how that's controlled. I'm reminded of the equine center up the road a bit and how that presented problems, similar soils and so runoff and detention facilities and things like that.
Yes, sir. Excellent question, Mayor. And now I'm going to show you the layout. We're going to have a detention pond, not only for runoff water, but for contact water. And these are going to be lined ponds as well. And we're going to actually reuse that water in the regeneration of the compost. So we're going to actually have a closed loop where we're going to take the water that's captured from the runoff and the contact, 2 separate ponds, and then we're going to recirculate that back into the system. So we've looked at that as part of the design as well. That's an excellent question, sir.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to move on, and I will pause. So there's a lot of information, but I will take some pauses after some slides. Design criteria. What are we looking at as far as the big picture on our design? Our IGA stipulates that we made a commitment through our IGA partners that Loveland is going to be sending us 26,000 tons of yard waste. And instead of going to A1 Organics, which their current contract, we are obliged to take that material and put that into the processing. So right now we have 26,000 tons committed from the city of Loveland. And we also have some material that we just get in naturally from ourselves. So together with that stream, we're close to 28,000 tons as soon as we open the doors, right in June of 2021. Our compost pad is designed to hold 40,000 and process 40,000 tons. From an engineering and processing perspective, when you're going through the construction of something like this, you don't want to build a pad just for your initial needs. You have to look to the future and design elements and design concepts. Knowing that we want to grow this facility, knowing that we want to put in a food waste component to it, we've taken a very pragmatic approach in our design and engineering, and we're actually making the pad a little bigger than the current 26,000 or 28,000 tons that we need right now. As you know, construction costs is a lot right up. If you do it now, you're better off now. If you have to do it later, you're actually paid almost double for what you could have paid in the beginning. So knowing that initiative, we looked at the pragmatic approach of expanding it, and the difference from 30,000 to 40,000 on a pad was only $500,000. And we made the executive decision to go forward and just expand the pad right now. And that's already built into that $5.8 million. We're also utilizing proven technology. The technology that we're using from compost operation is a basic windrow operation. Proven technology that is very basic. It's very rudimentary. We're taking a lot of provisions also to have the area very well protected. We could cover the windrows as well for wind events. A lot of times what compost operators do is they use mulch or other types of materials to cover the compost during high wind operations. That's something that we're taking into provisions and looking in our standard operating procedures. And also Larimer County is looking at this with approval, of course, from our commissioners. We're looking at this as potentially operating it ourselves. Jeremy Groves, our landfill manager, actually operated the Alpine down in Denver. Alpine Waste had a compost operation down in Denver. So Jeremy is a seasoned operator for when it comes to a compost operation. And myself, I worked for a company back in Ohio back in the 90s. We ran a compost operation ourselves. So between Jeremy and myself, you have 2 people here that actually know how to run a compost operation. The finished compost, Larimer County could also be a potential buyer of this compost. We are going to be capping and closing our landfill, and we're projecting to do this right around 2024. In closing a landfill, you have a lot of capping material and vegetated cover. Some 18 inches of vegetated cover are needed over the site in order to grow grass and prevent erosion. It's just part of our whole plan. So we're going to need quite a bit of this material instead of importing that from other sources, because we don't have a lot of good soil here. We got a lot of clay, but we don't have a lot of topsoil. We were planning to import that from other sources, but this compost operation actually proves itself to be a vital source for us down the road, so we could be our own customer for this. The other key factor in the design criteria is the expandability of this project, the phase 2. It will allow us to integrate the food waste component. I will show you in our scheduling plan, our compost food waste component is something that we're planning to do down the road. There is still some design ideas and criteria, mostly circled around the collection. We're working very closely with Fort Collins and Loveland, and we're going to have some more meetings down the road about integration. How do we collect the food waste, and how does that become a key process within the operation? So you have to figure out how to collect it effectively. You also have to figure out how it's going to be processed effectively. We have designs and ideas. We visited a number of facilities already that are handling food waste and yard waste, and we have some conceptual thinking as far as what we want to do. But the question is, how do we work also in the community and our partners? And we need more further vision and understanding, and that's why we're doing this as a phase 1, phase 2 approach. Does anyone have any questions on just this design aspect of what I just talked about? All right, I will move on to some pretty pictures. Well, this is not a pretty picture, but this is an overall site plan. So this is our site. This is our landfill, our property. The compost is right here. Our main entrance is right here, right off of Taft. It's just north of our gatehouse and just right next to our shop. Our water source is right here, actually. So we have a good water source. And I'll show you a close-up of this compost site in a little bit more detail. But I wanted to show you the content of where it sits relative to the transfer station. Here's our transfer station, kind of in the center, just a little bit dead of center, south of center of our site. All this here, if you could see my mouse, is where our landfill, all the buried material in our landfill application is all here. This will all be capped in a couple of years, and you'll just see a big rolling hill. That's what this will look like in the foreground. The behavioral health is right down here, is in the southern eastern corner of our site, and this will be in the northern eastern corner of our site. Here is a close-up of the compost site, where it sits in relative content. Here is our scales. So traffic off at Taft will come in. We will have this scale operation accessible for compost. So as folks come in and drop off, they will come and weigh in and go through our normal scale house procedures. They will then enter the road. We're actually going to have a large perimeter road around the whole complex. And right over here, I don't know if you could see it. I'll try to zoom in a little bit. But Mayor, you'll see, and I could show you more detail, but we're going to have our contact, a stormwater pond for contact water and also for stormwater. We're actually going to have 2 ponds in access. Everything is sheeted. And what I mean by sheeted, meaning the direction of the grade to flow this way. It actually flows, when it rains, the water is going to flow this way. We're also going to have perimeter bases here to capture the runoff water, and it's all going to go straight directly into the ponds. So we're not going to have any water, any contact water or any storm water actually leave this perimeter, because it's all going to be captured and then directed to these ponds. We'll also have pumps associated in these ponds, so our water truck could come in, and we're actually going to use this water. And in our water truck, we have a water cannon, and we're going to have windrows all along this section here, and we could water those windrows as they're being turned. So very basic yard waste, windrow, compost operation. This technology is used all over. Nothing earth-shattering or high-tech about it. It's very basic. But we wanted to do this kind of technology also to put in a process that we know we can manage, and also have a cost factor that will allow us to at least attract material to this facility. So the economics associated with this was very important. And we've also done an economic analysis on the operations, and the numbers show that it's actually pretty favorable We can be competitive in the marketplace if we wanted to attract some material from other sources that are not being attracted to today. So if there's other sources down in Loveland or other areas, we can actually go after some of that material or attract that material to our site from areas that are not being serviced right now. Here's a look at a compost turner and what the windrows would look like. This is a pretty fancy piece of equipment. A company called Comtech out of Austria makes this compost turner. This is one that actually I'm very familiar with. We used it in our operation when I was working for Norton Environmental back in Ohio. And it uses a slow speed, high torque turning application. And why that's important is because you don't want to shred the material. Sometimes you'll get some contamination in these windrows. It could be a plastic bag, just something that's in there. And what you want to do is turn the material on a regular basis in order to make sure you get your proper composting operation going in the right way. And then afterwards, you would screen the material and then get your final compost. And then in the screen material, you have your unders, which is your finished material, and your overs, which is your reusable material that you put back in the windrow, and it's all a closed loop system. Here's a look at what the potential for a future food waste component would look like. Again, this is not, we're looking at something like this conceptually. And here's your pond. You can see the pond in the background is lined with HDPE plastic. So it's a holding pond for warm, stormwater. And you also have a receiving building here. So if, in retrospect, if we wanted to do our food waste component, we would have to add on a receiving building where the trucks would come in from their collection routes of food waste. We would take the material, we actually would have a elevated sorting station to clean any contamination. We would then also have some equipment. There's some equipment out there that actually does debagging and also cleans up bags and other plastic items. So we have quite a bit of good technology out there already that can clean up materials from a food waste component. And we're planning to do that in a closed building. This building will also have leachate collection because it'll be on a concrete floor, as well as a biofilter for air circulation. And that is to contain any odors. We're going to be very sensitive about any odors or the emission of odors out into the general area. So actually, we've toured a couple of these facilities already, and they're actually pretty clean. When you do this kind of environment of biofilters and leachate collection to contain any potential waste or contamination that could come into the area. Once the food is received, it's cleaned up, it then goes into these bunkers. These are called aeratic static piles. Underneath the bunkers, you have an air circulation system. It uses positive and negative air. You could switch back and forth between the two. And what that does is that accelerates the decomposition process associated with the compost. It also helps to control odors. In areas where you're having an odor, if there's an area of the windrow that's going anaerobic, you switch to negative air and you suck the air through the windrow, with the static pile. It also goes through a biofilter and then it gets recirculated. Once the pile hits a certain maturity level, it's usually within 30 to 40 days, and then it could be put into a curing pile, as you see here. Here they're using just a static pile in this operation. We would just put it into our standard windrows. So if you envision this would be windrows from our yard waste, and then we would add these components later on as part of our food waste in our phase 2, you could see the parallels of how we could easily expand the site and integrate a food waste component as part of our natural design. Is there any questions so far on this? Anything with food waste or yard waste? Okay, I will move on. This is my last slide. This is a look at our schedule. Right now, we have completed our 60%, and by July, we will be at our 90%, and we will be submitting our permit applications. We're already in the midst of our air permits, our stormwater permits. Again, we're going to be submitting our Class 1 compost registration with CDHPE. We anticipate this will be closer to the end of July. And then we also have to look at any stormwater modifications associated with our EDOP. That's with our current landfill. And we also have to get through our location and extent once all parties agree that the land could be used for this application. Again, we anticipate our design criteria to be completed right around the end of July. Hopefully, if everything's in place, we could go out for bid for construction right around August, within September. Now, this is a very time-sensitive aspect because you don't want to be pouring asphalt in the middle of the winter. Some people do. I would not recommend it because of the sensitivity of what we're using and what we're doing. So it is important for us to get this done within a certain window before the frost really settles in, and we could pour asphalt and do all the site grading and development. The construction probably take a good 3 months from start to finish, depending on when we started and when we could complete it. But we feel comfortable that this construction period, hopefully if everything's in place, could start around October and continue on throughout the spring and into the late spring. And then by June of 2021, we should be operational and ready to go. And that is the yard waste timeframes and time schedule. That completes everything I have as far as an update. I will certainly open it up to any other questions. If anyone has anything else. I will stop sharing so I could see everyone's.
All right. Is any other questions for Lou?
I have one. Susan Gutowski here. I'm just catching up on a lot of this. It's amazing, fascinating. But I'm wondering if Lou could tell me whose project is it? Who are the partners, players in this vast project? Or both of them, actually, the compost and the transfer station?
Lou, I think you're muted.
So sorry. Thank you. It's technology. So we're using, we have different partners with each of the projects. Currently, we're using Burns & McDonnell's. They've been a design engineering firm for our compost operations since the beginning, and we are following through with them for the remainder of this project. We also have, as a sub-consultant, a gentleman out of California who's a compost expert. His name is Matt Cotton, and Matt is known as an industry expert when it comes to compost. So we have these resources that have been helping us and guiding us with the design, with the parameters, and the particulates associated with this design. Both myself and Jeremy Groves are very familiar with compost operations. We've actually ran operations before, so we bring some experience to the table when it comes to putting this together, as well as from operation and a design. It's something that we have a good team associated with that to give us some high level of expertise. On the transfer station, we have an excellent team. The team originally started out as HDR and ourselves. We have been working with County Engineering Department, and now we have Keith Myers. We're very grateful to have Keith Myers in as the project manager and project lead on the transfer station. And the connection of the transfer station with the behavioral health is actually something that's a great idea, because it will allow us in our bidding process to utilize the best opportunity to get the best value by combining both projects. So
Yeah, she's talking about agency. This
agencies.
is a county project.
Oh, I'm sorry, the agencies. Thank you, Laurie.
That's all right.
I was going into engineering. The agencies, this is a county project. This is a Larimer County project, both of them. All three of them are.
Mhm. But thank you for the other information too, though. I appreciate that. It's interesting to know who else you've brought in, and they all sound very competent. Thanks for that info.
You're welcome. Sorry. Thank you, Laurie. Any other questions, please? All right, silence is golden in some cases. With that, I will pass it back to Leah. Leah, you have the helm. If any other questions, and this information will be available. My slides will be available, so everyone could definitely have it and see it again. And I will be available for any questions in the near future. Thank you, everyone.
Great. Thank you, Lou. Appreciate it. Well, I think that just the next thing on our agenda is if there's any general comments from members. We can do that right now. Otherwise, just move into which, Laurie, I'm going to defer to you on the next meeting date. But quickly, did any other members have any other comments?
Leah, this Wade, I would just, this will be a very industrial site, and that's where, with Birmingham and the considerations around the mental health facility is essential. But I think it's hard to appreciate or at least to these two uses and how they can be compatible with the transfer station, the trucks. I know right now, we have a landfill and it has trash trucks on a all-day basis and that sort. But it will have a much bigger industrial feel with these different operations operating on that site, and in conjunction with what is now, there's really no other than the offices for the solid waste offices. It really doesn't have a campus out there. So for me, it's just this reconciliation of these two uses in the site, and not questioning to a large extent how we got to where we are, other than just trying to reconcile what we're trying to do, and the use of the site for the mental health and our waste shed objectives.
Great. Thank you, Wade. Is there any other comments? If not, then we'll move to Laurie and looking at next meeting dates, and hopefully we'll be able to see people in real life sometime soon.
That would be ideal, wouldn't it?
It would be. It would be.
So the question is the policy council feeling like you would like to meet again in July? We're happy we have enough material that we could update the policy council, or do we want to get back on our quarterly schedule and meet 3 months from now?
I don't know how everyone else feels. I'm perfectly fine with getting back on our quarterly schedule. I think that's, we've all had a lot of disruptions recently, and the more we can get back into a routine and how we can make sure we're moving this forward and being helpful, I think would be good.
Is there any objection to that? And I guess the main question would be, and I'm sorry, Commissioner Johnson, for interrupting you, does that mean our old quarterly schedule, or does that mean 3 months from now?
I think you're muted, Commissioner.
I know, I was partially just talking to myself, but I don't remember what our old quarterly schedule was. I'm fine with either. I really appreciated the in-depth presentations this morning, and I'm wondering what you have planned for the next meeting. Would we be at a point where we could have this level of an in-depth presentation on the transfer station? Would that be something appropriate for the next meeting? I know we had a schedule kind of lined out for all of the meetings, so what were you thinking about doing at the next meeting?
That's nice.
Yeah, so my plan would be for our next meeting is we would begin to talk about the transfer station with the policy council. We should have our communication specialist on board then, so we can give an update on educational and communications going out to the neighborhood, and then a quick update on our permitting process for the new landfill.
Well, I think I would defer to the PAC on determining like the timing of that next meeting to communicate that information to us in the most appropriate time, and then from there perhaps we can just move to quarterly from that particular meeting moving forward, just to get us to move forward.
And Laurie, this is John Kafalis. Would, if we're having the next meeting, I understand in July, would we be able to, would we get an update about the proposed open house? Are you hoping to have that happen before the next meeting? And also to be informed of the open house so we could participate if we choose.
Yeah, if we have the July, I would expect we could, make a proposal to the policy council on what we would like to see for an open house, have some dates available and an agenda, and we could as well still have an update on the transfer station. I don't think we'd have as much information on the new landfill or our approach to our educational campaign, but that could be moved to the next quarterly meeting.
So one of the agenda items for the next meeting would be to discuss the open house. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir. We would have for you and then seek your input on whether you thought that was the best approach or you'd like to add to or delete from.
Well, of course, the county and the cities, we certainly from the county perspective, we have good experience and I think a good track record of doing these kinds of open houses with signage and all of that. So hopefully we won't have to get too much in the weeds with making that happen.
I guess I kind of share that thought, John. I'm thinking it's probably not worth delaying the work on setting up the open house a month until we meet again. These guys, the staffs of both entities, all three entities, four entities can work together on a good open house plan. I think the earlier we get input, the better. So I would suggest we let them go ahead and start with the open house now and not delay that. Let's keep that on track and have them handle that. I'm comfortable with that if everybody else is. I think that gets us good input earlier.
Agree, Commissioner.
I agree as well. Okay, so Laurie, I think that we should defer to staff and you tell us when the most appropriate time to have the next meeting is.
Okay, so then what I would do is put us back on a regular annual schedule, which would mean there would be no meeting in July, and the next one would be whatever the next quarter is. I think it would be October. And at that meeting, we would have an update for you on how the open house went. We would also give you an update on the transfer station because we should be nearly complete with design. Well, we will be complete with design and we'll have the bid out and we're moving forward. We can give you an update on the neighborhood meeting and fill you in on the new landfill and our communication specialist.
And of course, you can always provide email updates to the whole group when you get a date or an agenda for the open house. I'm sure we would all be interested in receiving those. We easily could do that without having to convene a meeting of everybody. I mean, we talked about sharing information kind of on a regular monthly basis. I think that would be a good use of our time.
I would
All right,
agree.
we can do that as well.
Okay, then. I think that's settled. So with that being said, I think that is all we have on the agenda with 4 minutes to spare. So I hope you go and enjoy this beautiful June day and take care, be safe and be well. And we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you, Leah. Take care of yourself.
You too.